Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Blake Bettner, and we are back in studio. Today I'm joined by a couple of new faces. Mr. Kyle Snarr, welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast.
I'm glad to be here. You have had me here before, but never on the video setup, which I'm
never
really excited
on the video
about.
stuff. Yeah, we can see that lovely face here. And we've got John Gaffney. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You may have been on before my time, I imagine.
I have been.
Your writing
it's
has
been a while.
appeared on the site quite often. You've got some great reviews up there. A Unimatic thing, I think, that was pretty popular at the time, right?
Yeah, the U1. Yep.
You still have that watch? Do you have that watch? Was it your watch? Did you own it?
I did own it. I do not own it anymore.
Okay.
It needed more wrist time, and I wasn't giving it to it. So
okay.
yeah, catch and release at that point.
We've all been there. What are you wearing on your wrist today, John?
Today I am wearing a Mark II Project 300, which you can see there. It's an homage to a early Seamaster 300.
Very cool. I think we're all big fans of Bill's work over here. We've got something really cool in the works, actually, about his new project, the Tornik Rayville, which I believe you are also pretty familiar with, John. So yeah, we're actually going to be shooting some video on that later this week. I'm really excited. We had a chance to talk to you and Bill about that watch and got some really cool details, stuff that I don't think either Zach or myself even knew about the watch or the history of the brand. So really excited about that one. Boy, I don't want to get too far off track. Kyle,
Yeah.
what are you wearing on your wrist?
Yeah, today I'm wearing my pretty new Tudor Black Bay 36 blue dial.
Oh,
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
his new obsession.
correct. It arrived. It's a long wait. There's a lot going on in the delivery and manufacturing space to delay things. But I have to admit, this is a watch I've had on my eye on for some time.
Mhm.
I was looking at it, definitely into its kind of cross between the ultimate dive watch, ultimate field watch.
Sure. Yeah.
And, it was actually, good old Ed Jelly's review of his own that sealed the deal for me, reading that. And I even reread it recently just to kind of like remind myself why his words, kind of like swayed me so hard. And it is, it's dead accurate to kind of what this watch brings in terms of like the all-arounder,
Yeah. So yeah, shouts to Ed Jelly. He loves that watch.
Yeah.
I know he talks fondly about it. Often very cool. 36 millimeters looks perfect on your wrist.
Thank you.
So congratulations on that.
What are you rocking?
I have a watch on. We just got these in today. These aren't for sale. This is the Marin Instruments Skin Diver. This is a prototype of this watch. They have there's a white dial and a black dial. Very interesting designs, I will say. Kind of like some classic. It's called a Skin Diver.
Yeah.
Shapes going on, but also some like modern. I don't even know what I would call it. Like there's something like Ming-esque about the bezel here. I don't know. They're pretty interesting watches though. We'll have a lot more coming on these pretty soon. And yeah, I think the guy we'll maybe talk with him, Justin, who's behind it. He's got some other really cool things cooking. So keep an eye out for that coming soon. Josh, what do you got on over there?
I have my Casio, was it A15A, which is pretty much as light on my wrist as it was on my wallet. So.
All right. That's a good combo. Cool. All right, Kyle, for those who don't know, who didn't listen last time you were on, maybe tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure.
And what you're doing here.
Yeah. So let's see. I have my fingers in a lot of pots these days. But one of the things that I think a lot of folks know me for is I'm one of the co-founders of Contourment, which is an EDC tool cloth brand where we create things that kind of objects that are tool cloths that live in between a regular sized bandana and a regular sized handkerchief. So handkerchiefs kind of, very useful, fit in your pocket, but you can't tie it around your neck. You can't tie it around your head. Bandanas are very good at being tied around things, but they're often, for me at least, too bulky to fold up comfortably and stick in your back pocket and have them disappear. So we kind of went for that Goldilocks size with some added functionality and some added, I think product enthusiast vibes with the illustrations. And we're having a lot of fun. Worn and Wound and the wind up shop was our first retailer. And so it got me to end up working really closely with Blake and Zach on a lot of products and projects. And they've asked me to come aboard and help consult on partnerships for Worn and Wound and helping produce some new ways for brands to get involved in really authentic ways on the platform.
Sure. And just to pause there real quick, if you're curious about Contourment, the last time that he was on the podcast, we had Bill Yao on as well.
Yep.
This was maybe a year ago.
Yeah, about a year. January.
January, yeah. So if you're curious about what those are, what you can do with them, we talk all about that kind of stuff on that podcast. We'll put it in the show notes below. But yeah, you're here to talk about some other cool things that readers can look forward to seeing on the site that's a little bit different from the usual kind of slew of content that we're all pretty excited about. I believe it's called Toolkit.
That is correct. Yes. So, for me, I've spent a lot of time in the last 5 years working for digital publications. And one of the things that always happens in the world of digital publications is brands want to get involved. They want to reach audiences. And publications like Worn and Wound, it's important that they preserve editorial independence and that they have a strong voice and a strong opinion. You obviously know a lot about that and can speak to that. So, what are ways where brands can get involved and produce great content, but not have it commingled or confused with organic editorial? Mm-hmm. And so, Worn and Wound has taken some really cool steps at kind of helping kind of make sure the folks know what is sponsored content, what is branded content, and what is not, and what is just coming from you and your team of amazing writers. And, one of those things that you can see on the site today is some of the kind of the showcase pages around branded content that look very different than regular content in the Worn and Wound ecosystem. They can be colors of the brand. They can be a little bit more set apart and identified very clearly as this is brought to you by this brand. But I am a huge fan. I've been in advertising my entire career, and I love branded content. I think it's a really valuable way for brands to actually create amazing stories that aren't just, banner ads or, static ads in a magazine, but to really get stories across. And I've had the opportunity to even, judge some cool advertising contests in my day. And 9 times out of 10, the coolest stuff in those contests is typically not just like advertising, but the cool branded content that occurs. So what we set out to do is create a place within Worn and Wound that is really kind of set up specifically to help brands have a vicinity and a place to tell their story, but have it be our voice and have it be our writing, but their product. And so we have built a new, what we're kind of calling a franchise within the Worn and Wound ecosystem called Toolkit, as you said. Mm-hmm. And this will be a cool, I hope, very cool place for fans of products and brands to come and see their more information, more storytelling specifically around these products in use. And really, Toolkit is leaning into a trend that we've seen obviously for a long time, which is like the whole everyday carry trend, or EDC. It's really clear from the Worn and Wound's point of view that folks who are into watches are also into their EDC and their everyday carry. I was really lucky to help Blake and James launch the EDC section of the Wind Up Watch Shop a few months ago. Yeah. And it went great, and I think the sales and the activity on that portion of the site is a real strong proof point that we can maybe tell some stories around watches and the everyday carry that complements them. Yeah. And Toolkit's going to be a place to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of interesting avenues there for content. And look, we like to be transparent with all this stuff. That's why you're here talking to us about this. And I don't think anybody. But I think we have a pretty fine-tuned sense of like, okay, I'm being advertised to. But I think we still want to work with advertising partners and create things that we would want to to consume ourselves.
Exactly.
Which is why we try to you thought of things like this that allow us to kind of tell more interesting stories about the brands, the people, the products.
And it's all about putting it through an expert lens, which is why we've brought in our old friend John Gaffney to do this. And I'm gonna wax poetic a little bit about John for a sec, because when I found Worn and Wound, John was a fixture. He had a lot of great stories on there, and they a podcast, as you heard, as well as a great video on YouTube, which we should certainly link to about John's, at least his watch collection of that moment in time.
Yeah.
But he's a great storyteller, and I'm just going to go ahead and say I do follow, John, your Instagram, Watch Knife Pen.
Yep.
And
I have not updated it in far too long, but
well, I think
you better start.
I do think that little exercise of you pairing a watch, a knife, and a pen really was what gave me some of that validity in saying, hey, maybe something like Toolkit can exist within Worn and Wound, and we can, on behalf of brands, go take their watches and maybe their pocket knife and pair it with objects and tell the story of that watch and why it's important through the lens of EDC.
Yeah.
And so, I'd love to hear more from John's point of view too. But
John, tell us what can we expect to see?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle's covered a good amount of the ground here, but finding the pairings of tool watches being kind of the backbone of that makes sense to go together, whether it's situationally, whether it's aesthetically. You guys have done a great job in some of your collaborations and pushing the edges of design on some of the pieces. And, you've got your more standard steel, all steel dive watch that kind of goes with anything. And then you could have your super bright Zodiac Seawolf that you did that maybe doesn't pair as easily with simple stuff. So, Kyle referenced Watch Knife Pen, and I started that just because I'm a nerd for design and tools and gear, and I would select it based on what I was carrying that day or whatnot to kind of keep the rotation interesting. And so it was a fun way to share with friends. And it definitely is, situationally dependent. Going to carry a different pocket knife in a dress situation than I would working in my yard or whatever. But for me, a watch, a knife, and a pen always makes that backbone, and then it's you fill in around it depending on what you're doing. So
okay, John, the Worn and Wound Zodiac that you just referenced, very colorful. Give me a knife and a pen to go with it. What are you taking?
For a knife, I think the all white. There's an all white James Brand County that would look really cool. It wouldn't overshadow the the bright kind of aquatic colors of the Zodiac. And then I'd probably do to hit that orange, either a highlighter or something like I have an old Lamy click pen that is a bright orange that would look sick with it. So
all right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so what kind of brands can we expect to see as like kickoff partners?
Yeah. We're real excited. We've spoken to quite a few brands, and they've all expressed a ton of interest, and especially those tool watch kind of brands. Yeah. We're really fortunate that the first brand to jump on to Toolkit is actually Laurier, good friends of Worn and Wound, and they have lent a watch to John, and he'll be taking it on a little adventure. And I think what's cool is this content will and I'll let him talk about the adventure hopefully a little bit, but this content will arrive in a few different formats. And I think what we want to do is make sure that this content has legs, right? Yeah. So we want to see it in a printed format, or a written format, I should say, on the site. We want to see it within newsletters and social, but also here on the podcast, And so luckily, John has actually done his share of production in his day, and is game to be doing a little bit of a field report style production along with these. And I think what's great about Toolkit is that we've set up with the brands from the get-go that there are some rules of engagement, right? And we're here to share these with our listeners too, so they understand that these rules are going to kind of maintain and be in place. And the first one is that, we're not going to be providing product reviews through Toolkit. It's not going to be a reading it's also not going to be a reading of the press kit. It really is about three things. It's introducing that product to our audience. It's pairing that product with complementary tools that make that watch make sense on a day-to-day basis. It's maybe sharing some tips and tricks that would make that watch and its complementary tools are good for. And then a fourth kind of bonus one is Toolkit's a great place where brands who maybe do have some relevant ambassadors, which is something we don't really talk about too much in Worn and Wound, but if it's a relevant ambassador and there's a story worth telling, maybe we can learn about that ambassador through their everyday carry.
Sure, that makes sense.
But we're not reading scripts. We're not going to be just listing off the highlights of the watch. It is still absolutely editorial. But it's sponsored editorial.
So John, Kyle mentioned some adventures that you've been having with his Laurier. Anything you can divulge?
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of Kyle's call, how much we should tip our hand here. But
yeah, well, I would say, for those of you who are watching on the YouTubes, you'll see behind John, he's got a set of fins hanging back there in Swim Fin Alley.
A few sets, yeah, and there's a whole nother box of them down here. But
maybe just give us a highlight of like what types of activities you're into, John, and then we let people's imaginations run wild a little bit.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for anybody who's read any of my older reviews or whatnot, I always tried to get the watch out and about and do something with it. I enjoy, desktop review as much as anybody, but for me, I gravitate towards tool watches because I tend to beat the snot out of my gear doing things. And if a watch is going to survive with me, it can't just pass the doorknob test. It has to get out and about. So there's a lot of swim fins here because I ride alternative surfcraft and body surf pretty extensively. I'm in New Hampshire, right on the border with Maine. So throughout the year, down to temperatures in the ocean will be in the low 30s. Oof. And the air getting down into the teens or single digits. So we're going to get the Laurier out on the water in the next few days and put it through its paces and have a toolkit that aligns to that and the watch. And it'll be the Neptune, which is a cool dive watch that they have. And yeah, so a lot of aquatic things. We've got a lot of mountains close by as well. So depending on the watch and the tool and the kit that we're pairing with it, the intent is to get out there and put it through its paces.
Well, it's exciting to hear. I'm excited to see what comes of that. I mean, just those kind of adventures. I think it's fun to hear about watches being used in these kinds of ways. Let me ask you: does like finding the right tool watch, can that be an inspiration to get out and do something with it? Or you're like, I'm going to go do this. I better find a watch to go do it in. Or I want to put this watch through something crazy, and that's kind of a part of your relationship with that object.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on, I definitely gravitate towards certain watches for certain activities, just because more legible in a certain situation, or I want a certain sort of bezel to be able to time in the way that I want to. And some of it's just like repeatedly hiking, summiting the New Hampshire 4,000 footers in one watch. So it's like always on that activity. For the water stuff, I tend to rotate up a fair amount, more because I just enjoy doing so. But it tends to be whatever's on the longest NATO strap at that point in time. That's been set.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun to look at a watch and see what's the best activity that's going to lend itself to it. What's it going to fit into? What's going to be right for it? And vice versa. If you're doing an activity, what's the right watch to get up to that? I've got a couple of old Seiko divers and they're not diving anymore. I'm not as adventurous as Jason Heaton in that aspect.
Well, no, I mean, this sounds, I'm not in any rush to jump into 30-degree weather. And especially in mid-teens, I don't want to have to jump into 30-degree weather to warm up, I guess, or water.
The water is the warm part.
Yeah. So, are you a sentimental person when you do this kind of stuff with watches? Do you keep them around? Are you like, I've done these things in this watch, and that is kind of, that binds me to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also cognizant of if I'm doing something that I think is like a formative thing, of making sure that whichever watch goes with me is one that's like going to stick around, so that I feel it's kind of a symbiotic thing, right? It's the watches that you've taken somewhere, and then also taking the watch that you want to instill that memory to. Like Kyle just got that new Tudor. He's been obsessing over that thing for a long time now. And I'm sure that for him, like making those memories solidifies that love of the watch and whatnot. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely the sort of person that has a hard time letting things go that I've developed an attachment to or have memories with. So I'm also cognizant not building memories with things that I have to let go.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, John. When I was waiting for this 36, the AD that I was working with, they said, well, we've got a blue 39. Do you want us to just send you that and you can just wear it while you wait for the 36? And my whole reason of saying no to that was so that I wasn't beginning to record memories with the watch that I wasn't going to end up with. And so, yeah, I think that's something I really pay attention to too, is making sure that I'm recording memories onto watches that I know I'm going to keep around and that are going to trigger those good thoughts for me.
Yeah.
I think just two less things I wanted to mention about Toolkit, and we can talk about some other stuff too and tool watches in general. But one, we are going to be showcasing a lot of different kinds of EDC through this process. So I think it's a no-brainer that obviously knives and pens are going to be part of that. And I should say probably more pocket knives, but maybe some fixed blades too. But some things that you can carry, and we'll be kind of trying to point out things that might be a little bit more, I don't know. You might not want to carry them into this particular type of place because the laws of that, the laws like of Rambo that region, are kind of strict about that. And one thing that is a part of a lot of people's everyday carry are firearms, and that's something we will not be showcasing in Toolkit. Just so folks know that that's just a conscious decision that we're making. That firearms aren't going to be something that you'll see paired with these watches, even though I think there are some cool ones out there, but that's just not what this one is all about. The last thing I just want to say is that, at least John and I know you as well, Blake, we care deeply about this stuff. And what we want to do here is create, a way for Worn and Wound, which obviously has to make money with brands in a collaborative way, doing stuff that is cool to us, right? And that's what Toolkit is really all about, is we wanted a vehicle, a franchise, like I said, that we're stoked on, that we can't get enough of, and it happens to be sponsored content, but doesn't feel, look, or sound that way because we've kind of set it up from the beginning with the brands that this is what we're going to do. And, if there are some things about the functionality of that watch that don't work on this particular trip, we're going to call them out. So that's just part and parcel of being part of the Toolkit franchise.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And we're being transparent. This is a business. Our kids got to eat.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think what you said is really true. Like this is stuff that we all kind of live, eat, breathe, sleep.
Yeah.
Like this is what I do for a job. But on the weekends, I'm still like trolling forums and looking at watches for sale here and going on eBay and jumping in discussions in certain areas. Like my brain doesn't turn this stuff off when I clock out at work. Like this is stuff that we do.
Nice.
Yeah, I know, but it's it gets under your skin a little bit, and I think it goes into what you're saying there. And I've been a proponent of shifting at least my own collection to more new watches exactly because of that. And the kind of romance and the stories of some of the vintage watches is initially what pulled me into this hobby, I'm sure it did with a lot of us. But then, I think there was a moment that you stop and kind of think like, what's going to replace this in 30 years for like new collectors that are getting into it? Like who is building those stories now? And when you find something that's been in a family or somebody's dad did this in it, or that's something that's incredible that kind of elevates a watch from just like springs and gears and a steel case and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's, as collectors and people who enjoy this kind of stuff and use these watches, it's almost like we have a duty to be imparting these things into new watches. I still like vintage watches, but I found that I've really gravitated towards newer watches for this reason. Like I want to be the one building those things, and I might not be jumping into like super cold water or anything, but I like to hike, and I would argue that having kids at all is a pretty rough environment to be having a watch on. I know you've got one or two or kids.
Four. So
you know what this is all about. I'm sure it's a war zone at times in your house.
Well, I mean, it definitely requires robust watches, So that's definitely, if you looked at my collection, the vast majority of them would fall into like just call it the robust category.
Sure.
And and there is that. we talk about it all the time, is that kind of ability to go from one activity to the other without even giving it a second thought.
Yeah.
I love dive watches. I have a couple, but I'm a field watch guy aesthetically, and I love that idea of the smooth bezel, which is kind of why I went with the good old 36. But I have a lot of watches in that same category, and having and I think Mark II is a great example too. They have a couple examples that you've got that field watch aesthetic, but with that completely robust, waterproof, and tool-tastic sort of vibe going with it. So for me, that checks a lot of boxes and survives the daily wear and tear without having a bezel that's going to be sometimes cumbersome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's okay to appreciate a style of watch for its aesthetic, even if you're not like, my life every single day is like out in the field and like doing whatever, right? I think there are practical elements to these, and especially dive watches. John, I'm sure you can speak to this better than either of us can. Like, that work really well in everyday life. That like the features that are built specifically for that purpose translate really well to other areas of your life.
Oh yeah, I mean, I use my timing bezel on all sorts of things, whether it's making dinner or paying attention to, Gail and I, or my partner, will go for a hike or whatnot, and just keeping track of how long we've been out there. I mean, when it comes to winter surfing, for me, with temperatures that you're getting into in the Gulf of Maine in the winter, it's easy to get hypothermic pretty quickly.
Sure.
And it's easy to lose track of time and not understand how long you've been out there. So, no different than divers needed for decompression, to understand how long, they're going to be ascending. For surfers, it's keeping track, making sure how long you've been out there, not from a timing standpoint of being somewhere, but of being safe.
Mm.
So it's pretty critical from that standpoint. I've found it's also surprising how many guys are just like, hey, do you know what time it is? I gotta get back to my wife and kids, and it's just been too nice out here, and I don't know what time it is anymore.
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me the time in the surf last Tuesday.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I mean, it's super helpful from that standpoint. I've got what would be more a navigator bezel on a number of my dive watches. That is it's 12, there's 12 indices on it versus the 60-minute elapsed. And I used to love that for travel, because for work, I traveled across time zones 2 or 3 times a month prior to COVID. And so for me, it was always tracking what my, what time zone my partner was in at the same time. So I could give her a shout when I wanted to. And I love the brutal simplicity of that versus the GMT, which I love a GMT. And that's definitely a grail watch for me someday. But I've also started to cull the majority of the vintage stuff out of my collection in the last couple of years, primarily because it wasn't getting wrist time. Because I was either, particularly some of the smaller stuff that really was like vintage field watches, they were never intended to take the sort of abuse. They were like 1-2 year watches. And they've survived, and I was just not wearing them. And I was like, there's going to be somebody else who's going to appreciate this more than I am and give it more time. And I think that's if you can do that, for me, I'd rather have somebody else appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because you're a caretaker of something that's survived that long. And it's like, part of that's taking care of it, part of that's appreciating it. And to me, that's wearing it too. So I've started to default primarily to most days putting on something that's modern, that I'm like, worst case, I can get parts for this.
All right, so you listeners may have noticed that there's a voice suspiciously absent from this subject, Mr. Zach Kazan, who kind of has made his case of kind of stepping away from the tool watch and into more elegant things, and I think that's just fine. But I think the whole thing, the cases that we're making is like these suit our lives and the uses that we kind of like make for them in our own lives, and And whether he'll admit it or not, I would still say that's a tool
Yeah,
that he's using it for. It's not purely ornamental, right? And I always say watches are what we make of them. Because I know a lot of people will say, Rolex is just jewelry and it's all this kind of stuff. Well, if you're using it for what it was intended to use for, or you're finding a use for it in something you're using it as a tool, it's a tool watch, right?
Totally.
Does that hold any water? Or am I just being, I don't know.
No, I think it's using it for its intended purpose absolutely makes that.
For creative purposes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I had the washer and dryer in my place broke, so we had to go use the laundromat here in Brooklyn. And so I stuck this stuff in the wash, and I asked the guy on the way out, how long does those things take? He knew right 27 minutes. So I'm like, I better twist the bezel, and I knew right on the dot.
That's awesome.
Took my son to a few shops to give some Christmas ideas for him and all that. And then, I was bang on. It was great.
So Zach's given up the NATO strap as well, right?
Yeah, he's not fond of the NATO. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm a big NATO fiend. I like them. I think they're cool.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit, I think about a year ago, people started chopping that little kind of holder strap off. I think to Mr. One James Stacy.
Our friend
put that
James,
out there.
former guest of the podcast as well. Yep, I think that was his.
Yeah.
Doing. I don't know where he got that from.
I think it was just his own dealio. But I'm all about trying to figure out what to do with the extra length of strap, because I tuck it in typically, and I tuck it kind of on the outside going in rather than coming toward my wrist, to tuck it away from my wrist going into the two
keepers. So the
keepers.
little tail's kind of sticking out a little bit.
But I've also seen a few guys who just let it fly, let it flap in the wind.
Just let it roll.
And I've tried it. And for some reason, there's kind of this kind of carefreeness about it that I kind of like.
Okay.
So sometimes I've been just letting it go wild, and I don't know. Have you done this, John? Where are you at with the tail of the NATO strap?
I'm a strict traditionalist in this instance. I do not cut the keeper off my strap. I do not cut the end of the strap. There's a very real reason why your NATOs are as long as they are, which I can talk about that in a second too. But no, I don't let it hang out. I don't like anything hanging off my gear, period.
Right.
Things that hang off get caught on things. Drawstrings get caught in saws, on your hoodie or whatnot. I tuck my hoodie cords inside the neck of my thing. I worked on a framing crew in high school and college. Don't get caught in a table saw. It's not a good thing to do.
He's tucking his in right now.
Mine in right now. Look at me.
So, I think it. I know a couple people who do it. They can pull it off, but I'm also not the sort of person who can wear Italian dress shoes untied and look good doing that either. I can't.
No socks.
There's some stylistic stuff I don't look great doing.
Yeah. Hey, this is all how we stay in our lane, right? You know exactly the kind of thing that suits you, not only your taste, but your lifestyle and the things that you're doing every single day. And I'm sure that took you some time to figure out, this is my lane. This is the watches this is how I need my watches to wear. This is how I need my watches to fit. And these are the functions that I look for and need in a watch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've heard a term before. It's a young man acquires toys and an older man culls out his collection.
Yeah.
Right. It's finding what works best for you. And there comes a certain point where you're like, I don't need all of the things. Mm-hmm. I know exactly what I need now and what's going to work best for a variety of situations, probably.
Yeah.
Right. There's 4 different fins up there. They have 4 different purposes.
Okay.
Kind of 3. One's a vintage one, but it's different tools for a different situation. But yeah, I mean, you start focusing in on what works. And I haven't listened to Zach's discussion of dress watches versus tool watches, but I can say I appreciate a beautiful dress watch. I should not be left in possession of one, because it will shortly not be a beautiful dress watch, which is a crime against that dress watch.
Okay, fair enough. Have you guys seen this the Tudor Pelagos FXD?
Oh yeah.
You seen the strap on that thing, John?
Yes.
It kind of comes back on itself, and then it's got the Velcro self-adhesion.
Yeah, it's got the Velcro, which I think is super rad. It looked like the actual issued version almost has a duckbill hook on it or something. Yep. They had a secondary thing on it, which to me seemed vastly uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the idea of
Have
this
you seen
Velcro.
it in
I would
person?
love to see more of these. I haven't. We're rating on ours from Tudor review unit, and there's a lot that I'm really curious about with this watch. I was looking at some other pictures of it, of just the case today without the strap on it. Somebody had some angled pictures. The fixed lug bars look like they sit almost below like the belly line of the
Right,
case
right.
back. So I feel like that's why because you see wrist shots and it looks totally normal,
Yeah,
like
tight.
normal size on the wrists. And so I think that 51 millimeter lug to lug is a red herring. I think that the actual like usable like wear to wear like lug distance is much shorter effectively than
All right,
that.
you're gonna have to explore that one.
We'll get in. I
really-
just like the idea of this strap though, and I would like to see more straps.
Oh,
like
I'm
this.
stoked on it too, because I always loved the IWC, the Bund watches with the Velcro straps that they provided back then.
Mm.
And the Ocean 2000 is the civilian version. And so I've always loved the idea of a watch intended to go on a Velcro strap initially, like a true tool watch. So I was
That's
stoked when
interesting
it
to
came
hear.
out with that. Yeah. I think they're done well. Gas Bones makes really nice ones too.
Yeah,
But I haven't like a watch that's designed to go on one is different to me.
Yeah.
than
That's
one
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
you make a good
put one
point.
on.
You know,
Yeah.
for me, one of the biggest things about more kind of time at home over the last few years is like wearing multiple watches a day and trying things out.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's and it's okay for maybe John. Maybe you should try letting that NATO end fly for an hour or two midday, and then and it's okay. And I think that's what's kind of cool is like I'm probably on my third watch of the day today right now.
Okay.
Just because it's there, I can switch it up and I can try new things. I can try Velcro strap. I can try, and I think just like you were saying before we started recording, John, like I have several watches just laid out on my desk next to watches, knives, and pens. And I think just that's another kind of opportunity to do some curation of just like your desk each day is just like sit there and what watches am I going to lay out on my desk today and be inspired by and be interested in and kind of pick up and tool around with next to a great pocket knife or
Nice pawn. Tool around with those watches.
John, you mentioned you got a few watches in front of you. What are you looking at there on your desk?
I've got one of my one of my two Seiko 6105.
Okay. The Willard?
105. It's a symmetrical case. What's that?
That's the Willard?
So this is the interesting thing. This is not the Willard.
Okay.
The Willard would be the asymmetrical case, but the movie is set in a time period prior to the asymmetrical case being available. So this is the watch that should be the Willard.
Okay. The real deal. I like that.
Yes. So Martin Sheen should have been wearing this one. This is a 6105 8009. What is it? This is a resist, which is the most rare variant of the 6105 8000 8009.
Yeah. Very cool.
Because they were there was proof, then proof resist, and then resist, and then they switched over to the asymmetrical case.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
super nerdy.
But what does that mean? Proof resist.
So that was before. So originally Seiko was on the dial and the case, it would say waterproof. Then because it's not waterproof, right? It's only water resistant down to a certain thing. They got called out on that. So they had to change the terminology.
Okay.
So they changed the dials first because that's what's visible. So there's a bunch of watches that say resist on the dial.
Got it.
And proof on the case. Then once they ran out of cases, they went to resist. So resist on the dial, resist on the case. And everything after that is resist.
Love it. Have you had that watch a long time or?
I've had this one 5 years now. Yeah.
Okay.
I had a 6105 8000 that I traveled around with, speaking of like making memories with. Was a watch that I had wanted for a long time. Got it, wore it all over the place. Actually traveled in Vietnam for a few weeks, went on a trip with my sister and wore it there. And then a opportunity came to trade it for a Mark II Paradive with a friend, and I traded it away, which I don't regret the trade, but I regretted not having the 6105 anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have two now. I found one that literally the waffle strap that came stock on them had cracked at the hole that the original owner had worn. And they just put it in a drawer and never wore it again. And so somebody found it, sold it as an estate thing, and it still had the strap on it. They didn't know how to get the strap off of it.
Oh, wow.
So it had not been worn since that strap had like failed.
Yeah.
So I have that, but I don't wear that one. It's literally pristine.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
And then I've got a Paradive on my desktop, and you spoke of the Tornek Rayville. I have that here.
Yeah.
That's been getting a lot of wrist time lately.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. There's a lot that I would like to say about that watch, but I will wait until we'll have Zach Weiss on, and he's the one that's actually doing the review.
Cool.
So we'll talk about all that kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot there that is really like emblematic of why I love modern tool watches so much. It kind of like embodies all of it, which is great. I would love to get my hands on one of those at some point soon here. So do you guys would you call yourself collectors or just enthusiasts that own multiple? He said he had a couple
that's an important semantic difference.
Yeah.
I fall squarely in the enthusiast route because it's beyond just
Do you
watches.
kind of bristle at somebody like being called a collector?
No, I don't bristle at it, but like my enthusiasm is for watches, but I also have enthusiasm for cars. I have enthusiasm for gear. I have enthusiasm for EDC components. Like it's the same enthusiasm. It just happens to be expressed in a few different ways. And so I don't separate those things from my enthusiasm. So I don't collect cars the way I collect watches, but I've had some cool cars. Watches are just something that is easier to hang on to and have more of, but my enthusiasm is pretty equal across those things.
Yeah, it shouldn't have to imply ownership. Right? You can be enthusiastic about this stuff.
Oh, for sure. And I think, and for me, I even love curating digital things. Like I still use Pinterest pretty extensively because I'm curating a collection of images that inspire me or that kind of send me off into different directions with style and with adventure. And I definitely, it's weird about the idea of collecting digital objects. My kids are very much used to that idea. That's something that the next generations are going to have wired into their, hard drives. But for me, it's like I'm enthusiastic about all those things, and watches is one of the ways that my enthusiasm for design and for the outdoors and for, objects, like I love just product enthusiasm. Watches is just one of those expressions of that.
Yeah. What about you, John? Are you a collector, or would you call yourself a collector?
I would say I'm an enthusiast who has a collection.
Okay. I feel like as soon as you said like you cross that boundary when you have multiple versions of the same thing.
There you go. That's probably
sure.
a good telltale sign.
Yes, yeah, and I've had I think 4 different 6117s. That's a whole. Yeah, I have collector predilections for sure, as Gail would tease me about. Yeah, I mean, Kyle and I are friends outside of this podcast and friendly and share a lot of interests. So what he said resonates with me too, of an appreciation for a variety of different angles. For me, it's a lot about design and function, right? Like if I'd had a different route, I might have been an industrial designer or something of that ilk, because I appreciate trying to solve problems. And most good products are solving the problem and providing a purpose and fitting into, your lifestyle. And I definitely am an enthusiast for a variety of avenues that manifest that. Cars, watches. I've got quite a few baseball caps over there. Cameras.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, definitely more on the enthusiast route. I've been a collector in the past.
Okay.
Less of a collector now.
How would you like that perspective is interesting. How do you think that has shaped your taste over the years that you've been involved with watches? Like, do you look back and think, well, I can see how I started here, but I've kind of ended up here, and there's a reason for that, which is the...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, I was always, my watches, I was drawn towards military design initially, primarily for the function really being the first order of priority there, function and reliability. And I appreciated that just, I guess, ethically or kind of what the intent there was. And that led me to a field watch, quite a small field watch, a GGW 113, which is, for people who don't know, is a 1960s to late 70s military spec watch, field watch made by a few different manufacturers, but it's small. It is not very water resistant, and it has a very finicky crown. And so I really appreciated that. But I was like, okay, this looks really small on my. I've got bare paw hands, so it looked like really small in comparison to that, and it couldn't go in the water for me. I spend my summers either in the lake or in the ocean.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I need to gravitate more towards a dive watch here.
Yeah.
So it keeps evolving, and you keep. I think anybody, if you're an enthusiast, you find new things to become enthusiastic about. Often those are activities, right? Your life is constantly evolving, and with those activities comes different use cases and different needs, and watches go right along with that. I used to spend a lot more time in an office, so I wore a dress watch occasionally. Like, would throw on a tie or a suit or whatnot. I haven't been in an office that would require a dress watch in quite some time.
Nice. Well, I'm certainly happy to hear that. I think that's an interesting evolution, but that sounds way too sensible. John, do you have anything that you guys, or Kyle, that's a kind of like, people you'd be surprised to know that I have one of these in my collection? It's a little out there, it's a little weird, it's a little funky. Maybe it's a little big, maybe it's shaped a little strange. Do you guys have anything out there that kind of pushes this realm?
On a watch?
Yeah, watches.
Trying to think.
Yeah, let's go.
Neither of you, you're way too sensible.
No. I mean, okay, so can I go back to my pre-worn and wound days?
Yeah, all right,
so my
yeah.
pre-reading of worn and wound. So I have a Nixon Rotolog.
Okay.
Do you know what this watch is?
Yeah, this has...
So it's a digital readout of an analog style disc watch. And so it's kind of groovy, right? It's a big cuff-like integrated bracelet. It has real wood enamel kind of like located on it. This was back in, 2004 or something like that.
Yeah.
But, it was, for me at the time, was a super expensive watch, over $200, which was a big deal as a kid right out of college. And my wife gifted it to me. Yeah. And I don't wear it anymore, but I definitely still have it and would never get rid of it. And it is a wild piece of industrial design. It just is. It looks unlike anything on the wrist. And what's kind of cool, that's interesting about it, is like the readout is on the right side of the dial, kind of where maybe like your date window typically is, in the 3 o'clock position. And so under a sleeve, it pops out really easily. It just peeks through and you see the full time. Nice. But it's I mean, that was an interesting. It's a really compelling looking design, and definitely not my cup of tea anymore. But again, it's not something I'll ever get rid of because of memories that it was a gift from my wife. But like, I think the cool thing is that it got me thinking about what's on my wrist.
Okay.
And so that when I stumbled upon Worn and Wound all those many years ago, probably almost 10 years ago when it was founded, that was a gateway drug into the world of accessible watches.
Yeah, I love that sentiment. And I think that's why we should never come down on anybody for Invicta, Nixon, like whatever it is. It's like, hey, it gets you into that world. Apple watches.
Yeah.
Having something on your wrist that you're using. John, what about you? You got anything that would surprise us?
I'm trying
or
to
have
think.
had?
Yeah. I also had a Nixon that I had not thought about in a very long time. I'm sure it's at my parents' house, but Kyle mentioning that. Mine was like more of a square watch, and it had it wasn't a bund strap. I mean, it was legitimately like a leather strap that went the entire way
The
around.
cuff, the
Like, it was
leather
like
cuff.
I think it was called the rocker.
Nice.
And I believe I got that for like 8th grade graduation
Okay.
from my godmother. And I proudly wore that to high school for quite some time, which
Perfect.
dates me, you know, and I have a lot less hair now, and it's not no blonde tips. So
Blonde tips
Frosted
and
tips.
Nixon
Yeah,
rocker.
there you
Look
go.
out.
Oh yeah.
Look out,
Yeah,
world.
What
the
about
whole
you,
football
Blake?
team dyed their hair blonde for playoffs. So
There
Yeah.
you go. Well, inquiring minds want to know, Blake, what's your secret watch in the back of your
Yeah.
stash that is an
Oh,
unexpected?
Yeah, I've got all kinds of weird watches. I've got all digital weird Seikos. Those are kind of like enthusiast level type stuff. Though I've got a Linda Verlin, a Spido Light,
Oh wow!
which is
those things are really cool. I reviewed
Yeah.
one of those 2009.
yeah, back when they like kind of yeah. Those are awesome. Like if you look at every other watch in my watch box or watch that I wear, that would be maybe the furthest thing that you would think that I would have, just because of, you know, I kind of stay in a certain lane when it
Sure.
comes to like sizes and functionality and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's out there, but I love wearing it. It's just it's got something to it that I just really like.
Well, it's also, I mean, if you take a look at it and then you take a look at like, is it Urwork or Uwork?
Yeah, or work.
I
Yeah,
never pronounce it properly, but
Oof,
you know,
work.
some of their stuff for Richard Mail, like
Mhm.
there's some design influence there. Like Linda Verdellen was pretty far ahead at the time. I think they don't get enough credit at
Yep.
times of having influenced some people and like where they were. It was really unique.
Yeah, and
mean-
that case, it's kind of like a skeletonized carriage that the watch kind of like sits in and
Yeah.
wraps around. I don't know, like it's surprisingly wearable. It's titanium, so it's pretty light. Like honestly, it's super wearable for its size. And you remember they did these things like the Rock, and there's something else that you could like snap right onto it
Oh, that's
for
right.
like skiing or dive, like a
It was
dive
like
computer.
a dive
that
watch.
would,
Yeah, it was like
snap
other
right on.
computers you could snap on. Yeah, it was a really interesting combination of the analog and digital.
Yeah, because those guys are real
Yeah,
active outdoorsmen
Oh, yeah.
as well. They're big time skiers. So I just like that kind of mixture.
Yeah, the component sort of.
Yeah, I would love to
mentality.
see more. It's just kind of out there and
Yeah.
kind of creative. I would love to see more brands doing that kind of thing, and I would love to see Linda Verlin like continue doing cool stuff. I know they're still making watches. I would love to see something new, maybe
Cool.
like a new line from them. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, that would be cool. I hadn't thought about them in a while. That was a unique perspective on things.
Yeah, I took we had some kind of a meetup with Red Bar or something like that, and I took it with me there, and nobody had seen
pretty
one,
cool.
a real one there.
That's pretty
Wow,
cool.
what is this thing? You know, so people definitely still get excited about it. So if they're listening,
Yeah.
take that as a sign.
There you go.
All right, to wrap things up, John, anything that you're hunting down, anything that you're working on watch wise that we should know about, or that we can help you out find maybe.
Oh, I've got my eye on a couple of things, but nothing really pressing at the moment. So,
Okay, well,
yeah.
here's your
I'm
chance. You
playing
can
it
you
playing
got
it close to the vest.
you got our suite of listeners that could help you out if need be. What about you,
Yeah.
Kyle?
I am I'm pretty much all set for a little while with the Tudor on wrist, but you know, I again like kind of like love all kinds of things, and been hunting down and actually just arrived today a pair of vintage 501s that I'm wearing right now.
Oh, all right.
Paint stains and all, so I'll take those and be happy with them for a little bit. But
All right.
yeah, it's kind of cool. And yeah, how about yourself?
I mean, the Tornic Graybill.
Oh, there it is.
I've become quite enamored with it. Actually,
I might
so
be able to help with that.
you can't. All right, he knows a guy.
I think he knows a guy.
I hear. All right, awesome. Well, I'm really excited to see some of the content that starts coming out of this toolkit. John, be safe out there.
Always.
doing it.
Yes.
And
Keep your drawstrings tucked in, your sweatshirts.
Keep your drawstrings tucked in. Yeah.
Yes. Remember that.
Yeah.
John, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. We hope you like Toolkit as much as we think it will like it. So
Yeah. If you've got any thoughts or feedback on it, leave it in the comments for us below. And listener, thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you next time. Take care.
cool. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. See ya.